The Arizona sun burned low on the horizon, staining the desert sky a dusky red. The land stretched endlessly, miles of dry earth, brittle mesquite, and whispering tumbleweeds that drifted like ghosts of forgotten promises. Near the edge of that lonely plain stood a small, weather-beaten cabin. Its owner, a poor farmer named Eli Turner, was gathering the last of his corn before the frost came. Eli wasn't an old man, but hardship had aged him. Years of sun and drought had carved lines in his face and bent his shoulders with quiet endurance. He'd lost his wife to fever 2 winters back, and since then, the farm had been more silence than life. Only the wind and the creak of his barn doors kept him company. That evening, as the last light slipped across the fields, Eli heard something unusual, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. A faint cry. He froze, listening. It came again, a woman's voice, soft, trembling, desperate. He dropped his sack and followed the sound toward the old well near the edge of his property. As he neared, he saw her. She was kneeling beside the well, her dark hair tangled with dust, her clothes torn and caked with dirt. Her skin was sunburned, her lips cracked. She looked up at him, startled, her deep brown eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. For a moment, they just stared at each other, the ragged Apache woman and the weary farmer. "Please," she whispered, voice raw. "Water." Eli didn't hesitate. He drew a bucket from the well, his hands shaking slightly, and offered it to her. She drank greedily, the water spilling down her chin, her eyes closing with relief. When she finally looked up, tears welled in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't think I'd live to see the night." Eli studied her, unsure what to say. The settlers and Apache tribes had lived in uneasy peace for years, but distrust still ran deep. Still, this woman wasn't a threat. She was starving, weak, broken. "You're safe here," he said gently. "Come on, there's stew inside." She shook her head. "No, you shouldn't help me. They'll think you're siding with my people." Eli gave a quiet, weary laugh. "Ain't much left of my people out here, ma'am. Just me and the dirt." He held out his hand. For a moment, she hesitated, then placed her trembling fingers in his. Her skin was warm, rough with travel, and as he helped her to her feet, something unspoken passed between them, a fragile thread of trust. Inside the cabin, Eli set her by the fire and ladled a small bowl of soup from a black pot. It wasn't much, just potatoes, carrots, and a scrap of salt pork, but she ate like someone who hadn't tasted food in days. Her name, he learned, was Ayanna. She'd been running for 3 days after soldiers raided her village. Her brother had been captured, her mother, she believed, killed. She'd hidden in the canyons by day, walked by night, until her strength gave out on Eli's land. "I shouldn't have come this way," she murmured. "You shouldn't have helped me." Eli stirred the fire. "If I don't help, then what kind of man am I?" She looked at him then, eyes shimmering with something more than gratitude, pain, sorrow, and disbelief that kindness could still exist in a world that had taken so much from her. The next morning, Eli hitched his mule and rode into town to buy medicine. His farm account was near empty, the drought had ruined most of his harvest. He had only a few coins left, enough for salt, flour, and maybe one new tool. But when he reached the dusty general store, he found himself standing in front of the glass cabinet, staring at a small bottle of healing salve. "That'll help with burns and infection," said the storekeeper. "Good for wounds too." Eli nodded. "How much?" 50 cents. He reached into his pocket and felt the last silver coin there, the last bit of money he had in the world. His thumb rubbed the coin's edge, and he thought of Ayanna, pale and shivering in his bed, her arm still bleeding from a cut she tried to hide. He didn't think long. He placed the coin on the counter. "I'll take it." The storekeeper frowned. "You sure, Turner? You still got to eat." Eli managed a smile. "I'll manage. I always do." He walked back home with nothing in his pockets but dust. Ayanna tried to protest when he returned. "You shouldn't have spent money on me," she said through tears as he dabbed the salve on her wound. "I'm not worth anything." Eli paused, meeting her eyes. "That's not true." She shook her head. "I have nothing. No family. No home. You risked your safety for me." "Why?" Eli's voice was quiet but steady. "Because once, someone did the same for me." He told her about his wife, Mary, how, when sickness had taken their first child, she'd still found strength to comfort others in the settlement, to give bread to the hungry when they barely had enough. She used to say, Kindness is the only thing that grows when you give it away. I figure she was right. Ayanna turned away, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. For the first time in days, she felt something shift inside her, a fragile flicker of hope. Over the next week, she grew stronger. She helped Eli in the fields, her hands learning the rhythm of the plow, her laughter slowly returning. Sometimes she'd sing soft Apache songs at sunset, and the lonely farm didn't feel so empty anymore. One afternoon, as they worked side by side, Eli looked at her and said, "You could stay, if you wanted. There's room here." She smiled sadly. "I can't. My brother, he's still out there. I have to find him." He nodded, though his heart tightened. "Then I'll help you." Ayanna blinked in surprise. "You'd come with me. I've got no one left to wait for," he said simply. "But maybe helping you is what I was meant to do." They set out at dawn 2 days later, the sky painted gold and crimson. The road ahead was rough, dust storms, soldiers, long nights under the stars, but together they pressed on. Eli learned her language bit by bit. She taught him words of the wind, of the mountains, of spirit and endurance. In return, he showed her small things of comfort, how to catch rainwater in canvas, how to tell when a storm was coming by the smell of the air. They became more than companions. Two souls scarred by loss, learning to heal in each other's quiet strength. After weeks of travel, they reached the edge of an army encampment where prisoners were rumored to be held. Ayanna's brother, she learned, might still be alive there. It was dangerous. If they were caught, Eli could be hanged for aiding an Apache fugitive. But he didn't turn back. That night, under a sky full of stars, Ayanna turned to him and whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Eli looked at her, his voice low. "Because sometimes, the right thing costs everything. But it's still right." She didn't answer, but in her gaze was something deep, a silent gratitude that words could never carry. They waited until dawn, when the guards were drowsy. Ayanna slipped through the shadows like wind through grass. Eli followed, heart pounding. They found her brother in a makeshift cage, weak but alive. Eli pried open the latch while Ayanna kept watch. Just as they lifted her brother to his feet, a shout pierced the silence. A guard had seen them. Eli pushed Ayanna toward the horses. "Go." "No, Eli, go," he barked, shoving her brother into the saddle. Bullets tore through the dawn air. One struck Eli's shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Still, he fired back once, twice, just enough to cover their escape. When he finally collapsed, the last thing he saw was Ayanna looking back, her face twisted in anguish as she disappeared into the rising sun. 3 days later, soldiers found him. They patched his wound and threw him in a holding tent, assuming he was just another drifter caught in the wrong place. But by nightfall, the tent flap rustled, and there she was. Ayanna. Her hair was loose, her face streaked with dust and tears. She knelt beside him, pressing his hand to her heart. "I told you not to spend on me," she whispered. "You gave me your last coin, your strength, your blood." "Why?" Eli smiled faintly, his voice a whisper. "Because you were worth more than gold, Ayanna. More than I ever knew." Her tears fell on his cheek like rain. She stayed with him until morning, when the soldiers, moved by her courage, let them go. Word spread through the camp, soft and strange, that a white farmer and an Apache woman had walked away together, leaving behind nothing but a story of mercy. Months later, they settled in a small valley far from the fighting. They built a modest home by the river, shared their harvest with passing travelers, and tended the land together. The days were simple, fishing, planting, and watching the seasons turn, but peace, finally, found them both. Sometimes, when the wind blew across the fields, Eli would pull from his pocket an old, worn coin, the one Ayanna had later found near his bedside after that fateful night. She'd kept it polished ever since, a symbol of what it meant to be seen, valued, and loved. He would hand it to her and say, "See that? You were never worthless. You were the reason I remembered what it meant to live." And she would smile, touching his scarred hand. "Then your last coin bought both our souls." Years later, when Eli passed quietly in his sleep, Ayanna buried that coin with him beneath the great cottonwood tree by the river. She stood alone in the evening light, her hair silver now, her eyes still carrying the warmth of the man who had once given her water, and hope, and the courage to believe in kindness again. As the wind swept across the grass, she whispered to the earth, "You spent your last coin on me, but you bought something that never dies." And in that moment, the desert didn't feel empty anymore. It felt alive, with love that had outlasted hunger, war, and time itself. True worth is never measured in gold or wealth but in the kindness we give when we have nothing left. Compassion is the only currency that never runs dry.